If you're looking to pick up Super 7 stuff, Entertainment Earth is always a great option. I do it all the time. You can check them out at the link in the description with my referral code for 10% off and free shipping of in-stock items.
Dragon Ball, horror, kaiju, and more. Steven's Toy Reviews.
Hey there, collectors, it's going to be Steven here, and welcome to, for now, the last of the Toho Ultimate-related Super 7 products, where we're taking a look at their Wave 2 Mechagodzilla, or it could be pretty much Super Mechagodzilla, because it comes with all the bells and whistles, I would say. Now, with this being the last one that I'm covering, did I save the best for last, or we just continuing a downward spiral? Because as we all know, it keeps on tumbling down, tumbling down, tumbling down. Well, I'm pleased to say that Mechagodzilla does have some highlights, but at the same time, there are a few things that we got to talk about, and I'm pretty upset with my particular unit. But it's not all bad. Let's take a look to see whether or not it's going to be worth adding into your collection. Unfortunately, I think it's a meme that I am a magnet for poor quality control, because I did get the short end of the stick here with Mechagodzilla. I showcased it in my unboxing, but for a few parts of the figure, most notably around the legs, I did have a few issues. But I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, as maybe we get closer to that section. I will say that for pretty much all the pictures that I've seen, there aren't really that many issues with the default head having any issues with the mouth being connected to the rest of the head. When we get to the roaring head sculpt, you will see that mine is an example of what a lot of people have had, but nevertheless, the default head does look pretty solid. When we take a look at the rest of the figure, we do have some overbleed here and there of silver paint, but when we take a look at the actual joints in the articulation section, it appears that some of them are black plastic painted silver and other parts are silver plastic painted black. Rather interesting. Now, when we take a look at the sculpted details, actually everything looks to be rather neat, and it pops out pretty well. We can make very clear notice of the different vents that are on Mechagodzilla. We do have the dorsal plates, which actually do have a nice ridge to them, which is really neat to see. But when we get into the silver paint of Mechagodzilla, mine is just riddled with issues, particularly on the right thigh. A whole bunch of scrapes and scratches and so forth, which is kind of disappointing, and I don't quite know why I just so happen to be a magnet for things like this. There are also a few scraps and scratches and scrapes and all that fun stuff on the forearms of Mechagodzilla unrelated to the shock anchors, and then of course you're going to have your miscellaneous quality control issues here or there. On the black parts of Mechagodzilla as well, you can also begin to see where the paint is starting to scratch away when it comes to high friction areas such as the joints. At that point, I would just say maybe scrap it all together and just don't let that happen when it gets to the customer. I don't know, just cast it in that color and call it a day. That's personally what I would do. I wouldn't be too upset with that, knowing how people react. But nevertheless, I think Mechagodzilla sculpt-wise is pretty solid. I don't think there are too many issues there. Actually reminds me more so of the Pipeworks games, but when it comes to the actual paint application, c'est la vie. One thing that I did not note for the accessory section, which we're going to talk about in a bit, but I think would be cool overall, is Super 7 could have done a light piping head. That would have been cool as well. Time to talk about articulation, and then this section will actually bleed on over into the accessories, so let's go ahead and get started here. So, for the articulation, for the neck, it's a little bit different on Mechagodzilla, because when we take a look at the alternate head part, we see this sort of bulb here at the bottom where we clearly see a socket for a ball joint. And while that is true, it's actually going to be a barbell style or double axis, because there's going to be a ball joint down here. It comes up on obviously that bar, and then we do have a ball up here. And that is about the range of movement for Mechagodzilla. You can only look up about that far because of the spikes, look down about that far because of the chin guard, and then obviously rock back and forth and spin all the way around. And I will show you that joint system when we go to swap out the heads. And then we do have the shoulders. This is the range of the movement for the hinges, so they can only go up about that far, down about that far. But we do have swivels, so we can spin the arms just like so, and we can use those to get around the cutout, if you will, of the arm socket, so this way we get a little bit better movement out of the hinges when we move the arms forward, if you will. We get like one more notch, if you will, if this were like a ratchet joint. But it's very, very weird that we don't have the ability to T-pose Mechagodzilla here. So when we move down, we do have a single elbow hinge, which on this one in particular, I'll go ahead and do a zoom in. You can see that this is not an isolated issue. That single elbow hinge is blocked a little bit when we move the arm back by this plating here on the arm, but I mean, it's okay. We do have the forearm swivel as well, so we can get Mechagodzilla's arm to turn, and that's about it for the arm articulation. The swivel does obviously go all the way around, just because of how it's constructed, though. It does look a little goofy, so even though you can, practically, should you? Well, when we get to some of the accessories, yeah, you're going to need to rely on it. So despite the fact that we're kind of at this point where the SH Monster Arts is very old, it is getting another issuance in some capacity. We've had a few other figures that have been able to sneak in some sort of bicep swivel. It is omitted completely on this Mechagodzilla, so that could have been something that would have really given this thing a step up, but it does not have any sort of bicep swivel. So basically, this is the range of movement that, oh, his back fell off. We'll talk about that too. That's basically the range of movement Mechagodzilla's arms is getting, unless you get creative with that forearm swivel. So you're going to need that. For the wrists, which is the one. Aha! It's over. So for the two sets of hands, they do plug in on a peg and they do swivel around. And they do hinge in and out. So interestingly enough, for Mechagodzilla, it looks like he's actually cast in silver plastic, and then they used black paint. Interesting. For the hands, for the alternate hands, because he does come with sort of splayed out hands, and then he comes with more so cupped finger hands. These are meant for him to fly. It definitely seems like for these hands, the disc here for the hinge feels like it's a bit more sensitive and feels almost like it wants to rip out. So I would say if you are swapping out hands, use heat. This one in particular had a lot of silver paint, interestingly enough, so I don't know what is paint or what is not. Caked in here, maybe it was excess plastic, don't know. But nevertheless, something to keep in mind. Super7 has been experimenting with ball joints. Mechagodzilla does have one in the waist here. We get a little bit of rocking movement forward and back, as you can see there. Very neat. Aside from the rocking movement, which that's what you get, and he can look up about that far, look down about that far. He can spin all the way around. Though I will say, you kind of notice it seems like he's snapping into place with those. The ball joint, when I go to turn him, does feel very, very tight. This is usually, to me, indicative that the actual joint is stuck and it's twisting. Like, if that makes sense. Like, there's a ball joint here, and there might be a peg or a ball joint down here, and that's stuck, and the actual ball joint isn't allowing the socket to turn. It's like clamped like this, and the actual plastic is turning. And that has happened on my Hammond collection, not Carnotaurus, one of them, and then my NECA Pennywise. It actually just sheared it right off. So I'm going to be careful. I don't really think I'm going to be turning him much aside from some of the pictures that I already took. Hips. I am not a fan of these designs because first and foremost, I'll go ahead and I'll show you the hinge, which is cool, but you can see that he has little pegs that plug into the pelvis. Those are very, very little pegs. So the left leg, pretty much no problem, just a little stiff. He can kick that far forward and about that far back if you want to be realistic without causing damage. But like I made mention, there are a whole bunch of miscellaneous small paint scuffs. For this leg in particular, it is rather difficult, and I'm very, very afraid to move it because it does feel very sticky. Yeah, so kind of scared there. But we do have dedicated thigh swivels, which is really cool. Single hinge knees, which is just fine. No real issue there. For the ankles, we do have hinges that allow you to move the foot like so. And then we do have ankle rockers, which allow you to get some pretty solid movement out of the feet, which is really nice. And these are actually really, really stable. You'll see in the pictures, I'm able to get this guy to stand on one foot with no problem, despite the fact that there's no die cast. And the legs actually do feel really chunky. So I think Super7 just kind of proved you don't need die cast in a Mechagodzilla to make him feel very hefty. So when it comes to articulation, as you move stuff around, you're probably going to have the back piece fall off, but this is intended for the Garuda. We'll talk about that. But yeah, do keep in mind, limited range of joints in some areas, and then, yeah. All right, so accessories. Here's going to be your overall shot of everything Mechagodzilla comes with. He's going to come with some parts to swap into flying mode. some parts, which include a head where he is looking up. We get a total of 4 jet boost thrusters, and like I made mention, he does come with alternate hands. We do get the shock anchor cables that he comes with, which is pretty cool. We do get an alternate belly part for the plasma grenade, and as I made mention, we do get the Garudas. Now, I'm not going to tease you anymore. Let's go ahead and talk about how we swap the alternate head parts. So this is going to be scary. I always recommend, whenever you have situations like this where you're not comfortable, get heat. Always use heat. But I am an untrained professional who knows nothing about anything. That was easy for me to pop off because I kind of sort of staged this. As you can see, that is a very long post. So what I thought would have happened was we just plugged in the head like that, and then we had a better range of movement. We would be able to rock it back. That's not really the case. So what you got to do is you just take the one head, you pop it on, and then you push down, and then you will feel it pop, and then we are good to go. So by default, the normal head is just the mouth closed, as you saw earlier. Then the extra head is going to be him roaring, and if the seam would have been a better seal around the mouth to the actual head, I think it would be better. But yeah, there are some memes going around the community about this being a Mystery Science Theater 3000 character. Nevertheless, aside from this one, we do get the alternate head part where he is flying. And this goes along with some flying part accessories. And I already showed you the hands, but in addition to that, we do get some jet boosters. Now, for these jet boosters, these are rather neat because even though they are meant for flying, you can use them for other purposes. So let's go ahead and snap on back over here to our actual assembly. So I already showed you how to swap out the heads, but how you do this is you just, at least I think this is correct, make sure that you follow the curvature of the actual holes there. And the small ones go up on Mechagodzilla's back, and the large ones go on the back of his thigh, just like that, and you do the same on the other side. Then, all you got to do is make sure you swap out the hands appropriately, if you would like. I mean, they're just hands. There you go. And head parts, and you're good to go. Mechagodzilla can go flying around without any semblance of a stand. The head sculpt is pretty much the same as the default head sculpt. They just moved around where you plug it in. Now, of course, if Mechagodzilla is going to be flying around, then he is absolutely positively going to need the Garuda. Now, the Garuda is rather straightforward, thankfully. There's no real trickery here, but what you got to do is you just have to pop off the back piece, which this is really easy to pop off. It's not exactly a friction fit so much as it is there's just tiny ridges that help it stay in place, but sometimes if you don't have it in absolutely perfect and you push down, you can see what the issue is. So yeah. So you pop the back plate off of Mechagodzilla, and then you pop the Garuda in, which the issue here when you make Super Mechagodzilla, right, is the Garuda attaches in the same way. So if you're, see how it's very easy to pop off. That's the point that I'm trying to make. Obviously, I'm being a little aggressive here to make it a point that Garuda can be easy to pop off. And something to keep in mind as well, Garuda is blocking these vents, if you will, for the boosters, so you can't use the two together. The Garuda overall looks fine at a distance. When you're up close and personal on it, though, you start to see that there are some things like the G-force lettering that one looks like it's in bold, the other not so much. Some have noted the proportions are possibly a bit chibi. I'm fine with that. It's not that big of an issue. Though when we take a look at the thrusters on the bottom, I can't help but think that they don't necessarily look symmetrical. Something about the two silver ones, it feels like the boosters there, the whatever, it almost looks like they are not printed evenly. I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. But what I will say is that the only stress test that I haven't done for Garuda is I have not whipped this thing at the wall, but I have dropped Mechagodzilla. It's obviously fallen off of his back. I've dropped it on hardwood. The Garuda hasn't broken, so it's pretty sturdy. Now, the Garuda does have some articulation as well. As you can kind of tell, it does have the cannons, and those just drop down like so on hinges. So not very impressive to say, but it is certainly there, and it is an option. Now, as well, Mechagodzilla does have a few weapons that he comes with. He is going to come not only with a plasma grenade option, right? So we just have this little belly button attachment part here, which just slips on over his stomach, which there are 2 notches there, and you're going to line that up just like so. But in addition to that, we do, as I made mention, have the shock anchors. There are going to be little holes in his forearm, and all you have to do is just line up the metal. This is not bendy wire, which I actually kind of do like now that I've been playing with it for a little bit. You just have to push them into the holes. But sometimes you may not have that hole lined up correctly with the metal pole. That's something that I deal with, unfortunately. You can ask the missus about that. Anyway, sometimes you don't line it up correctly, and it may cause just a little bit of damage. You can see that one's kind of I don't know, puckered already. I guess that might be the way to say it. And this one doesn't feel like it wants to go all the way in. But here's going to be a closer look at everything. And you can tell that from the plasma grenade, there is a little bit of a more so gunmetal coloration to the actual ring, which looks really cool. And then when it comes to the actual shock anchors, the metal really does contrast well with the silver on Mechagodzilla. And then when it comes to the actual tips, they're actually somewhat pliable. They're not exactly rubber, but they are a softer plastic. And that is, I believe, going to round it on out for our boy Mechagodzilla today. So here is what I will say. It would be great if we could get beams to go with Mechagodzilla. I mean, I think that's what I'll pretty much always say, especially because Super7 has shown that they do have the capacity to make beams, whether it will be an $85 DLC, convention exclusive, or some sort of pre-order power-up pack down the line. But when it comes to the feeling of ultimates, which if you look at the Ninja Turtle stuff, if you look at some of the Thundercat stuff, the Toxic Crusader stuff, they do like to pack in a lot of accessories and give you a complete package feeling. And I really do like that this Mechagodzilla does have that going for it, where everything else would just be like the accoutrements or something that you would prefer. I do think that a lack of a stand is pretty bad here, considering they do have the Garuda, which, okay, it is in the Super Mechagodzilla form, but they still could have done something along the lines of just have like a dud stand, if you will, where they could have just plugged that into the stand and have your Garuda flying on the shelf that way. And then also they included flight parts for Mechagodzilla, but did not include a stand for him either. So if you are looking for support stands, you know I got videos to help you out. And if you are looking for other accessories, you know I got videos there as well. To make things easier for a size comparison on you and myself, here's going to be Wave 2 of the Toho Ultimates alongside the Shogun Godzilla. So this way you can just compare them all because they all dropped at the same time, despite the fact that they wanted to make it easier on the customer's wallets and only limit the figures to 2 per wave. Interesting. So yes, here you go. Now, we all know that we do have Burning Godzilla here and Mechagodzilla, or Super Mechagodzilla, and I do know that some folks were looking to have these as replacements or stand-ins for SH Monster Arts or other figures in the 6-inch scale alongside the Shogun as well. Keep in mind, these are 8-inch scale figures. They will not fit in with anything in the 6-inch scale. And I also don't have some of the corresponding figures along with me. At this time, I can't find them, so yeah. So, buy now, skip, or wait for a deal. I have to say, just like I said at the end of the accessory section, this is the most Ultimates feeling, Ultimates Mecha, Godzilla, Toho, Kite, whatever wordage you want to use so far from Super7. I really do like this in concept. In terms of execution, there are some quality control issues that my unit particularly has, which I am not happy about. I'll come back to that in a second. And I feel like the articulation is a little questionable. And though I know that Super7 does have a more so limited range of articulation compared to competitors, there's just some stuff there that kind of makes me wonder why it's exactly omitted. The accessories, everything else would have just been neat to have, though I do feel any lack of flight support for flying kaiju is not only a trend, which is atrocious, but it's also rather disappointing. When it comes to the quality control, I will note, and some have even noted before, that I had my little incident with the Monster Arts Super Mechagodzilla. That was a higher price, and I had an easier method of sending that back to get better parts. But for here, I think I'll let the quality speak for itself. I don't necessarily think that this is an $85 product. I think maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of $65 for this particular one, if they were able to tighten up the quality control. I really do want to see Super7 swing for the fences and nail it, but when we do have this one here, I think this is a template for what they can do for the Ultimates line moving forward. If they're not able to do that, well, you already know my opinion overall for how I feel about what you should buy now.